Thank you. I call this meeting of the Board of County Commissioners back into session. We do have some action to take from our executive session. Commissioner Shanefield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve that staff provide a release and agreement and authorize the chairman to sign.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That brings us to the good of the order. What do we have for the good of the order today?
I have a lot, but whenever.
Well,
You can go first.
feel
Ladies
free,
first.
Commissioner Tillman.
Okay, it's been a busy 2 weeks. I attended the Bison CO2 forum, and the whole entire board did receive 2 letters opposing that. But I sat next to the lady from DEQ. She said she had a lot of information, and the lady from Frontier, they would like to come and present on the 1st or the 15th to talk about what DEQ is doing with the permitting process and how Frontier is doing the injection wells. So I told her I would check with the board and get back with them. Are you interested in having them come and visit with us?
Seems early, but it's the pleasure of the board. It's got a long ways to go before we're doing anything on it.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wendling.
Yeah, I think anytime somebody's willing to come before us, we need to provide that listening ear. Information along those lines. The sooner we start getting it, start hearing it, more questions may be answered. So I think if they're willing to come forward, Commissioner Tillman, I'd say tell them to pick and get a hold of
Okay.
Sally and get on the agenda. And,
Okay.
you know, I think we've been good ears.
Well, during the presentation, I was fortunate enough to sit next to the Wyoming DEQ lady who does the permitting. And it is a very strenuous process. She said she could have answered a lot of questions that night, but it was not her meeting. So she could fill us in on a lot of the underlying questions. And the lady from Frontier, they talked a little bit, but mostly the presentation was by carbon capture. So these would be the on the ground process people who could maybe answer questions and just give us an overview. So I was thinking about scheduling like 11 to 12 or so they had time to be flexible. Does that sound reasonable, or
Whatever works.
10:30?
Leave it up to them to schedule
up to them.
themselves.
And Sally.
Okay, all right. And then we all attend, or some of us attended the Williams project, and that's going to bring 300 million into Wamsutter. Sepulveda with Williams would also be interesting coming at some point in the future to talk to us about the Williams and the hydrogen hub at Wamsutter.
Whenever they're ready.
Okay.
That'll be good.
Well, I'll put them on different days.
Sure.
Attended. I want to thank Fred Von Aaron because the Pulse meetings were very informative. They had an industry update about the Genesis Alkali Granger expansion, the CCGEM, excuse me, the Exxon expansion and business activity, the Keltec, the plant operations manager talked, Williams Hydrogen Hub people talked, carbon capture, the Project Bison people talked, and the Business Alliance. So it was a very informative Pulse meeting. And the industry focus update was, it was quite interesting. The upcoming one that I know Lauren's going to try to attend part of it, and I will attend, is the Greater Green River and Wind River Basin meetings in the college, starting at 8 o'clock, where there's a reception on tomorrow night, and then all day Wednesday in room 3650 above the gym at Western Wyoming College. So that they're going to be talking about strategies for carbon ore, rare earth elements, critical mineral resource development in Wyoming's largest coal producing basins. So that's happening. I attended the hospital meeting. They came to Green River for their once a year annual meeting in Green River. And maybe I should let you talk about that one. The high point of it was they did their regular business, but Ed Tardoni had asked to have a think tank presentation. It was exciting. I mean, he spent a lot of work researching the baby boomers and how we are at the end of the baby booming cycle, which pays 25% of the bill with the VA and Medicare, yet it's 76% of the patients. You probably can attest to that, Bailey. But that we are to the end of that. Now we are coming to the age of the younger group who don't get sick or hurt, but have the best insurance. So how can we be reaching out to serve? It was a very exciting presentation. So I won't take it all away. I'll let Chairman Smith cover some of that. So those are the main things that I wanted to share with you today. Prime Lithium has filed a geothermal application to recover lithium. This was a part of our our monthly federal agencies. The chamber hosts a federal agency group that we meet with. We met the new ranger, Brian Wilson from Manila. He's in charge of the Flaming Gorge National Recreation Area. He's going to focus on getting that plan done for the recreation area, but he also has a lot of experience with Job Corps and working with young people, and he's going to try to engage more of that to get projects done on the Ashley and the Flaming Gorge. Buckboard water line is being replaced. The BLM has received 4 CO2 potential projects. And there are several solar projects in the works through the Bureau of Land Management. So that is my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Toman. Anybody else for good of the order?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
thank you. Just a couple things. I've continued to go to some of our organizational meetings like library and also recently attended the conservation district meetings. Have been spending a lot of time, actually, I think we commented this earlier, just kind of checking with our fire departments in Bailey on the progress of those situations and ambulance. And also one of the things I've agreed to do for the commission is to maybe look at doing some stuff with our legislators in a workshop setting. So I'm going to start reaching out to our local legislators and seeing if we can set a meeting with them prior to December and later in November, early December, as we prepare and look at legislation that should be presented to protect the county and help us out in the coming matter. So that's kind of where we're at and just want to share that. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling.
question for Commissioner Lloyd.
Yes, Mr. Wendling.
Has there been a list or anything prepared with regard to possible legislative policy that's going to be presented as far as any House bills or Senate bills at this point in time?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that.
Will there be any by that December time?
I'm not sure if there will be, but I think what the intent is to be able to have conversations about maybe concepts of things that we would like to see to go into legislation and maybe bills that could be created there, working with our other partners.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Commissioner Winling, the WCCA will have a list of potential bills, and I believe they'll be put out early next month.
Early next month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
'cause
is
I
a
was gonna-
meeting set up for it, and I don't remember when it is, but I think it's early next month.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? Perfect. I will just highlight on the Memorial Hospital Board meeting. That's a Red Tie Gala event scheduled for February 24th coming up. It was interesting. Their bad debt was negative for the month, which was good debt. It's like negative bad debt, so it's good debt.
That's good.
Yeah, so, but it is going to catch up because they changed over software systems. And so they're expecting it to be back in the $1 million+ range here shortly as it catches back up. And they're working very hard on days cash on hand and their bond ratings to make sure that they stay in compliance with those. So things don't change financially for them. Other than that, anything else for this meeting? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't think anybody's opposed. We do have a policy and procedure workshop here on chapter 7. So you want 10 minutes? Quarter till 11:45. 11:45. Thank you.
Did you tell them that we want something by November 1st?
Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners, we're working on Chapter 7. Chapter 7 has mostly to do with benefits, insurance, welfare, retirement, those types of things. There weren't a lot of changes. Most of them are, I think, organizational. I'll try to run through some of the highlights in there. One of the main sections, well, first of all, before we start, I don't know if you had any department head or elected official feedback. I haven't really had any. So one of the a lot of this is sort of some cleanup and getting some references. One of the sections, this would be section 1C, relative to insurance benefits upon retirement. So we added some language to clarify eligibility, meaning it's always been applied this way, but was a little ambiguous, that you had to be eligible 8 years and eligible for full retirement to be eligible for the insurance plan, post-employment insurance plan. I've asked Diversified to help me develop some information out of our plan. We talked about this a couple meetings ago, and the question is, when we created the retiree coverage, it was because employees who left the county employment at that time would be denied coverage if they had any pre-existing conditions. And many were, or that they would be charged such exorbitant rates that they couldn't get insurance. With the passing of the Affordable Care Act and some other federal laws, that's not really an issue anymore, meaning that you can, as long as you maintain continuity of coverage, you can move into other coverages, including those offered under the Affordable Care Act, without being denied because of pre-existing conditions. So it kind of begs the question whether maintaining retiree coverage after post-employment, the county doing that, continues to make sense, meaning the reason we did it no longer exists. Does it make sense? So there's a couple little challenges in that in order to have a more robust discussion. One is that we offered that as an incentive document. The school district did this at one time with the health, and there probably are a few people who are still on that program. And that's one question. And the second is getting a handle on what the cost benefit is. But today, the reason why I think it's worth revisiting is because there's enough options in the marketplace that are similar price wise. I'm not sure that it makes a lot of sense for us to continue offering that. I'm going to come back with that issue when I have all the information to discuss that separately. I just wanted to point out that we did make some clarification in terms of the eligibility. The other thing in section 1, I think that's notable, we deleted some sections that said, we'll have a life insurance of X amount. And this basically replaced it with the idea that any benefits that we have will be in the summary plan description so that we don't end up with the two being incongruous. So in the summary plan description, as each year when we do open enrollment or we review the coverage, if those benefits are changed, then we don't have to come back and amend the policy. So I think that makes more sense than trying to itemize them here and keep them current with the summary plan description. I think in section 1, that's probably the main thing. Section 2, well, one other one, there was, this has been a long time ago before any of you were on and near the time they had a debt elimination program that hasn't existed for a while. So we haven't done that for many years. So we deleted that, which would be paragraph J of section 1. Section 2 on continuing education or training, educational assistance. That's an area where we really just needed to be clear with department heads and employees regarding continuing education, specifically that training that is required for your job. That's required training versus that training and attendance that's voluntary, and what's going to be paid and what's not going to be paid. Sometimes department heads are vague about that, and then we end up in a dispute whether or not that's required training or we're just encouraging it, and if it's whether it should be paid or not paid. So this is really an attempt just to clear that up and be much more direct about the rules that apply to that. One that doesn't come up a bunch, but has come up recently. Sure. Yeah. Whatever. You stop me whenever you want. No, that was the main thing. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
You know, sometimes more and more I read it, sometimes it helps to clear it up. The thing that I see is even, I can understand exempt versus not exempt. You know,
Mm-hmm.
salaried employees do a class, study, or do a class and have to take exams and that, so it might be over 2 or 3 days, so per day salary they're getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some requirements, maybe and I could be wrong, but let's just use the assessment office,
Uh-huh.
where those people have to go take classes, you know, a week or something, and that involves, it gets to a point where, hey, evening times are no longer theirs, but they gotta spend them for education.
Mm-hmm.
Has there ever been any discussion about some center like on-call pay for those people in meetings, those hourly people?
Uh-huh.
Again, we do make sure our salaried people, you know, per day pay
Mm-hmm.
versus our hourly people. Thank you. Versus our hourly people who are done after 8 hours and that type of thing, and then they're on their own to do the educational stuff. I don't know if that's been
So
I know in education, it's not a big issue with our teachers because they on a per day, but when we send our classified people to work in that, and then they have to do some stuff they're not done in 8 hours.
yeah.
There's always been that question, well, how come we don't get paid for it?
Yeah.
And
So
hold on,
yeah, sorry.
I want to jump into that as well. And the other thing is if they're not under, if they're not done under 8 hours, it is outside the regular working hours.
Mhm.
But if it's an agreed upon training and it's something they need, and then I don't know if I agree that it needs to be within their regular working hours. If it's a training they need and it's 7 a.m. when it starts and it doesn't get over until 6 p.m. and they have an exam somewhere in there, whatever that may look like, they have to work through their lunch. They need to be paid for that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So they're obviously, if it's work time is the critical issue, both under the Fair Labor Standards Act and our practices also. Most training, as you know, especially for hourly employees, is tried to schedule relatively close to a normal workday. But some of them are not exactly that. Some of them are later. I have the Veteran Services, for example, they probably do about as much training as anybody. They do the American Legion, the VFW, the state training, the NAVSCO training. Some of those are in Washington, DC or Indianapolis or other places. So the total time spent training, regardless of what it's for, is paid work time, period. Yeah, there's really no, I'm trying to think some examples. So for example, they'll have, the assessors, as you mentioned, theirs is pretty strictly tied to the work days, for the most part. The VSOs, and I know a few of the sheriff's departments will have some where they have things that they have to work on to be ready for the next day. Again, those are work time, just like if we said, hey, we need to have X ready here to be ready for the board meeting tomorrow. That's all paid work time. And they're just paid hour for hour.
But I
them
think
for that.
then B1 doesn't, section 2B1 does not compute. Because if it says it's outside of employees' regular working hours, it does not, it's not counted as working hours.
Mhm. Yeah, I think what this criteria is trying to get at is the difference between voluntary training and involuntary training. And so if you look at these, these are like all ands. So you would have that attendance and training had to be outside of the employee's work hours. The attendance is voluntary. The course lecture is not directly related to work, and the employee does not perform any work in attendance in order for that to not be paid. You see what I mean? So
You got,
it's,
go ahead.
so, I mean, if we need to clarify, I'm happy to
You might-
clarify,
might-
but I'm just,
Might have to sort it out as to voluntary, involuntary. Because for example, I see not only education, but just employees working.
sure,
I see involuntary as far as it go in line with road and bridge.
sure,
This is your weekend, you're on call.
sure.
It's not voluntary,
Yeah,
it's involuntary.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
we're paying you to sit home and watch TV or do whatever you are at home, but you're on call.
So the first one, part A, training that is required by Sweetwater County and is pre-authorized is paid, period. All time is paid. The next one is trying to make what we're trying to communicate, because this is an area that supervisors get hung up on, is that attendance at lectures, meetings, training, and similar activities shall not be counted as working hours. And maybe we need to, clarify that with voluntary, but where people want to go is where it's not clear whether it's required or not. If it's required, there's no issues. We're paying for all the time that you need to perform. That's work time by definition under the Fair Labor
True.
Standards. But it's where people attend in these kind of like voluntary programs. And these are the criteria that the FLSA has set out to say whether it's voluntary or not, or if it's ambiguous, which is these 4 criteria. Attendance is outside of the employee's regular working hours. It's voluntary. That it's not directly related to the jobs. If the answer to any of these is yes, it doesn't need to be, or answer to these is yes, it doesn't need to be paid. So maybe we just need to clarify. The point of it is those, we want supervisors to apply those tests and to be very clear when they communicate with them, whether that training, how each of those issues is addressed, whether it's related to work, whether it's voluntary, outside of regular working hours. And we tried to simplify this from even what we had before, but I'll make a note and try to get
It's
something in there
just
that's clarified.
confusing. It's confusing.
Okay,
That's all.
Yeah.
Maybe just underline and highlight and put in all caps or underline it or something, because it does say this.
well, I think this
and
voluntary
this.
component is essential.
Yeah.
Let me work on that.
Work on that and clear it up if you can, please.
Yeah.
'Cause it was confusing to me. That
Yeah.
doesn't take much anymore.
Well, if it's confusing for you, it's confusing to others. So we haven't hit the mark, and that's fine. That's the purpose of it, is to try to clarify that. But just so we're on the same page, if it's required training, it's paid, period. It has to, the law requires it. All hours spent working on that in the service of the county is paid work time for hourly employees, period. Educational assistance, I started to talk about, this doesn't come up a lot, although it's come up just recently a little bit. And I guess this is something that the board kind of needs to weigh in on. But we've always offered educational assistance, especially in those cases where we benefit. Sometimes it's somebody trying to expand a skill level, somebody like Excel, or sometimes it's maybe somebody getting a academic achievement or a certification in a particular area. Eric's a good example in planning and zoning. When he started, we had certain levels lined out to get him up to where he is today, and timeframes to do that. So one of the issues comes up in here. The current language is that you're not eligible if you have other academic assistance. And the idea behind that obviously is we don't want people double dipping out a scholarship and we're paying for it too. But as you know, most of the time, and it's hard to know, obviously, but most of the time, even if you have financial assistance, it doesn't cover 100% of the cost. It covers 20% or 50 or 70. So, that's an area that kind of gone back and forth and, we can require the employees to provide proof of what they did get, obviously. But it's really hard to know because the entities that are providing financial assistance aren't communicating with us. So I'm kind of ambivalent about that particular issue is whether or not to change that language to say, any part not funded by educational assistance other educational assistance programs, or just leave it with if you're eligible for those. So that's one thing that we're wrestling with. As you know, depending on where you're at, could be grants, could be scholarships, could be private funded educational assistance programs. We have no way of really knowing what those are that people are eligible for. So it just have to be, so that's an area that I kind of wrestled with. I think the rest of it's pretty straightforward, just creating a straightforward process that you have to do to apply. Any questions on section 3 on the educational assistance? The one other issue, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, we're not real clear in here where the payment is coming from. So, meaning that is the intent to fund that out of the department budgets. In order to do that, it has to be budgeted. I tell you, no department budgets for this because they don't know when an employee is going to come and look at maybe getting a degree or some other things. We could do it under we have an employee benefit portion of my budget. That's an area, or we could do it from the board side by doing a budget amendment and approving the expense. They don't come up very often. So I think it would be important to put some guidance in here for the departments. If you guys had some clear direction on that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think that it would behoove us to do something completely separate, and maybe that's a $5,000 that just sits in an account, and that way we can easily track how much is being utilized annually, and we'll know who that's being utilized for, and you'll have, documentation. I think that makes it much cleaner. And then we can track it through the budgetary process as well. I think HR makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
And that way it's all in one spot. It's got one entry place,
Yeah.
That way you have the same form for approval too.
Yep. It fits.
Okay.
I agree.
Well, let me put some language in there because I think that's an area where it's going to come up like, well, okay, we want to do this, but where the hell we pay for it from? Yeah. So let me get some language in that area. That's a great suggestion.
Well, then maybe you can ask for a budget amendment to just put some money into it.
Well, I think, if the board's okay, when we do the budget this year,
We'll cover it.
we'll put
Yeah.
some money in there. And then, if there happen to be no, then at least we can amend that amount and it'll, as you said, all be in one place. I think
Well,
that's
and you can ask all the department heads and the electeds, to
During the
give you
budget
an
process.
estimate. Yeah.
That's right.
mhm.
Yeah, section 4, not too much. This is just normal sick leave policies.
Hang on a minute.
I'm sorry.
Just a minute, Gary, just a minute. On page 6 of 16,
Okay.
when it talks about for a grade of an A or a grade of a B or a grade
Uh-huh.
of a C. Good idea.
Well,
What's a good
mean-
idea? Where are you?
I mean, I think it depends, on,
What grade you get, you get
Oh.
percentage of your reimbursement.
Oh,
Is this really a good idea?
yeah, I mean, I think, some courses aren't scheduled that way. Some are pass fail or, But I think the goal is to say that if you're going to pay for it, you want people committed and trying and invested in it, not just doing the minimal amount to get it paid for. Um,
You
I-
might put a percentage in there though, because everybody has different, A might be 80, 90 to 100%. And some tests, they only give you a percentage score.
I don't agree with that.
Your institution's gonna determine. what it
No, but
is.
some of them don't give you A, B,
Well,
C.
some of them go pass, fail.
Some go 1, 2, 3,
No,
4.
those, the education, the substitute teachers, for example, you go on and take those courses, you go to 80 or 50 or 30%. You don't
I'm
get it.
almost thinking,
Final grade.
what's that?
Well, I see final grade as an E, B, C, or D, or pass, fail.
No,
Only because of grade point average.
the computer classes are a percentage. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, different institutions have different practices. That's
So
right.
I don't know that A, B, C, D is,
well, and I wonder I think maybe if it's not passed, we don't cover it. If it is passed,
fail. Yeah.
it's 100%. Like, I think this is too complex, and I like that you're putting a little bit on there that they're passing and we're gonna pay for it.
Mhm.
But I think maybe does pass fail, and that can be discussed and decided upon whenever, but
Because those online computer courses, they don't give you an ABC. You answer 20 questions, you get 80%, you get 20%, you get 100%.
Like the pass fail class being more specifically to like one of the enrichment type classes where they offer an Excel spreadsheet class.
Yeah.
You go, and they may have a pass fail, or they may not even have a grade at the end. But that kind of class specifically could benefit some of our employees because of that, and not have to go through an entire college class, more of that enrichment type concept.
Again, we're talking, this is the hard part because we're kind of commingle two things. Again, if we're requiring it, I mean, we're saying you need to develop proficiency in
we're
Excel. We're paying for the class. We're not talking about that. We're saying that an employee says, hey, I would like to, or I think this might be a good idea, or, you know, whatever, we might be willing to meet them on that. And it's just trying to figure out how far we want to go in terms of the reimbursement. I'm kind of okay either way. I think the important part is to recognize and meet people halfway that are willing to invest in themselves, especially right now, because you see so much change in the operating environment, both technology and other things. It's important to do that. So I'm okay either way. This was a policy previous boards had. I'm not. I think the important part is that we recognize and support investment in individuals that are willing to put in the time and effort to do that. So
Well, maybe we leave it until we see there's a problem. The
I don't-
problem occurs with it.
it seems high. It seems like it seems like it's just overwhelming. Like,
Yeah.
well, you gotta get this if we're gonna do this. You gotta get like it more work for you, more work
Yeah.
for the employee.
True.
any consensus on that? I'd be
Pass
happy to.
fail's fine.
I like the pass fail 100% zero.
I do too.
or
I mean, help simplify it.
Yeah,
I'm
make it
I'm okay
easier.
with that.
Because you get into all the different kinds of grading systems, you know, somebody's A is 80 plus, 90 plus, 95 plus, you know, so what's the name?
And I would also include, like, if you get a certificate for it, maybe, I mean, I guess that would count as passing. you know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
passing means in that. arena.
especially with community colleges, a lot of them are proficiency based. You
Yep.
can either meet the threshold.
Right, yeah.
The driving classes are a good example for
We're gonna see
CDL.
more and more of that up here at Western
Yes.
Wyoming,
Yeah.
based on manufacturing and everything that's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, let's leave
I'll get
pass
some
fail.
language in there.
Yep.
Was there anything else in that section? I think
But
those
you
are
could
all,
say for passing or receiving a proficiency certificate or something.
yeah,
Because it might not be a pass fail, it might be.
Yeah,
a
we'll come up with
proficiency certificate or some such.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to bring you back.
no, that's okay. I think that's an important one. So, section 4, was the paid vacation. I think we addressed some of these issues back earlier, and this reflects those changes with respect to some of the floating holidays and the accruals and the carryover and those things. I don't really have anything. It didn't seem to be a topic that's discussed a lot unless there's something that you guys would like to discuss. Now, I don't have any recommended changes to that. Section 5, sick leave, the only sort of point of clarification that was added, and we had to put this. We've always permitted employees, if they didn't want to accept their TTD benefits or temporary total disability for workers' comp, if they want to use their sick leave and receive 100% of their pay, they have the choice to do that. We've allowed them to do that, but it wasn't explicitly clear. So we added that into Part A for that to be just so it's clear and folks know. We discussed that with them, but we added that section in there.
Gary? Number 4 under that,
Under,
under the sick leave,
okay.
which is basically talks about minor children.
Mhm.
I'd like to see minor struck. So it reads include spouse, parents, children, and grandchildren. And I can explain why, but I'd rather
I agree.
just leave it there.
Second line of 4.
Yeah, under 4, the second line.
Okay.
Where it's goes into immediate family, which is quoted, which includes spouse, parents, children, strike minor, go children and grandchildren. I know there's some policies out there that go as far as grandparents and
Mhm.
step whatever, but I think to start with, we need to.
This is kind of an interesting one that we're backdooring into anyway, because most of the time when that's needed, you're eligible under the family medical leave policy. And if you're eligible FMLA, you're eligible to use sick
Yeah.
leave. So
And-
it's
and-
probably already.
And
being
if that's
done,
the
but
case, let's get them
Yeah,
aligned.
yeah,
Let's get them aligned.
that's- Anything else in that, I guess it's section 5? Jumps
No.
out at you.
Thank you for that.
Section 6, again, is holiday pay. We spent quite a bit of time with this a few months ago.
Yes, we did.
A few months ago, a few months ago, and a few months ago. And
But you know,
so,
maybe you make a good point, though. We all really ought to just, of course, we ought to just in November.
pick a
Address,
date.
yeah, either the first or third meeting, address holiday pay for the next year, or even do it sooner than that.
You mean
Sometime
take
in
the
the-
expectation in the policy so that it's kind of a.
It's ongoing,
Yeah,
it's turn,
expectation.
you know,
I'm
like,
okay with that. I will say that it's important. Sometimes, because people get busy, it's not brought up till later and then it's a pain.
it's important.
I mean, I would say no later than the first meeting in November, because it gets to be really difficult for people to trying to plan vacation and time
Well,
off, so.
I think if we tell Sally, who's responsible for getting the agenda to the chairman to have it organized, just make her put a note that first meeting in October, holiday, this is section 6, holiday pay is on the agenda.
I'll put in a date.
Yeah.
there.
Let's
Yeah.
just, just try and make it better for everybody. So we're not,
Well, you don't realize how few meetings there are from this point to, I
yeah,
mean, it's just a couple times and you're there and people are busy, so.
Royce brought it up a few times.
Has he?
Yeah.
I-
He acts like he's glad or something. You got to savor every moment.
7 really is the COBRA, or the continuation of medical benefits. That's handled as part of the health insurance program, and so this is just kind of a restatement of the rules with respect to
we're
that.
aligned federally with all that
Yeah.
stuff anyhow. So,
Yeah.
God, that's a good section.
That was a good section.
Honestly, how many more chapters?
Well, it kind of depends on whether we we combine them and some of them are not.
Let me
Um,
ask this question. Okay, let's finish section 7.
So the last one I think was really just taxable fringe benefits and that's pretty straightforward. I didn't have any recommended changes unless you guys do.
Thank you.
What-
Gary. Good work.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
what if we ask Mr. McLean to bring forward at the next meeting or the next meeting, no later than 2 meetings? That'd be the first one in, or that'd be the second one in November. Of whatever we've done for policy changed to that point, and we approve it. Then it's done and we can keep moving and approve as we go along, because after January 1, then you'll have a new majority and they can continue if they wish,
Rather than starting over.
rather than starting over.
Agree.
What's your thoughts?
So I certainly don't mind. The only concern that I have, and I can't see right now any specific examples, but we've seen this a little bit where we need to go back to 4 and combine some policies that are in a previous section, or maybe strike those and consolidate. So I have a little bit of hesitancy. I can't see any specifically, but that would be my only concern.
How much do we have left?
Three chapter, it depends, 3 chapters, 4 chapters, 3 or 4. My preference would be, the next one's probably the longest of the remaining sections. But I think if the goal is to kind of wrap things up, I would rather combine a couple of those into a meeting and do a few of the chapters, combine them and try to get them done by a certain date and adopt the whole thing. That would be my preference.
What about a special meeting?
Either, I'm okay with any of those things. I mean,
How much work it's gonna
Well,
take so to
4 more
get through
meetings.
them?
I don't think too much. I think,
Get it done.
yeah,
I don't want it lingering. I mean, I
Yeah.
wanna buy that.
Something like this is easier to do special meeting over Zoom too. So if somebody's out of town, as long as we have the information ahead of time, which I
Yeah,
appreciate you
yeah.
getting sent out.
sure.
Whatever you want to do. All I want, I don't, this was a burden that I think
Sure.
I pushed on to start with, and we accepted as a present commission. And I don't think we need to push it on to a new commission.
yeah.
Shit, it'll get, well, and it'll get left behind because as everybody knows, it takes at least 6 months
To get up to
start
speed.
figuring out which way is up.
Yeah,
Gary, could you provide us in the next week or so, a schedule?
yeah.
Like, hey, if we do these this day and
Absolutely.
workshop, these
I
this day
think
and
that's.
workshop,
reasonable, yeah.
we'll
Well,
be
what
finished
about-
before the end of December
Mr. Chairman,
or second meeting. in December.
well, what about just doing like he's doing it? I mean, after this
What are you
meeting,
saying? A
No, no,
schedule.
work
a
sessions
schedule of-
after our meetings as
Yeah.
fast as we
We're saying
can.
Provide a schedule
think
so we can meet it.
What I would do is just, there may be a couple of the smaller chapters or whatever sections, we can do 2 or 3 or whatever at one meeting to fit within that,
Mhm.
within that schedule. I think that's perfectly
I
fine.
agree.
I'll be happy to do that.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Oh, thank you.
suggestions.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope, that'll do.
All right. Then we
Appreciate
will
it.
close up our policy and procedure workshop, and thanks to everybody and good work all around. Great discussion. Let's do it again in a couple weeks. Couple.